Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yesterday I spoke about Mayavada. Notice the term Mayavada. It's a vad. It's just something that people say. It's not fact. We speak of Mayavad and of Achintya. Bheda Bhed Tattva. The Tattva is reality. Vad is just something which someone says. So there's a difference. Coming to this magnificent temple, it struck me that myself traveling in India and seeing so many magnificent ISKCON temples, it's become the standard. It's a cultural gift of ISKCON to the people of India, that in so many places ISKCON is establishing beautiful temples. And for me, going from one to another, it seems almost normal. I'm sure when people come here, the average resident of Pune who comes here is favorably surprised at the beauty and opulence. But like I say, going from one temple to another, I see it as something almost normal. So that is something ISKCON is well known for within India, establishing beautiful temples. And within the last few years, ISKCON has become known for social welfare work and activities such as feeding school children, and in this way helping to develop the nation. But as we read yesterday in Srila Prabhupada's purport, he states that the mission of the spiritual master, referring to himself, is to spread the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and to fight with and defeat the impersonalists and voidists. So, building temples is certainly part of the mission of Srila Prabhupada. Developing the nation, I don't think so. This is on the bodily platform. But the core, this central part of the mission is spreading the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and fighting with impersonalists and voidists. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings actually cannot be established as long as the impersonalists and voidists' theories are prominent. So, building beautiful temples for the worship of Krishna is certainly a major part of the mission of ISKCON, but it's not complete without spreading the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and fighting with and defeating the impersonalists and voidists. So these temples, they're not meant just for people to come at and look at and go away, but they're meant for teaching. So ISKCON has done very well in establishing temples in India and outside India also. But my proposition is that it's time that people knew what our philosophy is. People generally tend to think of ISKCON as another Hindu organization. There are so many. But people don't know that even that we have a philosophy. In general, people don't know, let alone what it is. And the fact that we are opposed to all these people who are cheating others. It's there in our books, but as I state in this book on speaking strongly in Srila Prabhupada, we have to speak it also. Otherwise it'll just be in the book. Just like, for instance, there are many things in the Bible which many Christians don't even know, or even if they read the Bible, they don't take it very seriously because no one speaks about it. For instance, in the Bible, it's stated in one of the letters, that's after Jesus ascended into heaven, according to the Bible, his disciples went far and wide, and in one of the letters, St. Paul, I believe it is, writes to his flock, the analogy of a shepherd and the flock, do not mistreat your slaves. So in other words, he's not speaking against slavery, which was common in human society. So in other words, officially, according to Christian teachings, slavery is not forbidden. But you don't find people going around saying, you have to follow the Bible, we have to have slaves. We're not properly following the Bible unless there are slaves. No one says that, so it's just there and no one takes it very seriously. Which is probably a good thing, because we also don't want to promote slavery. But I'm just using that as an example. So in the same way, there may be so many teachings in Srila Prabhupada's books, but unless we promote them, unless we speak them, then among the devotee society and among the public in general, who we're supposed to be preaching to, even if they read the book, then they'll think, well, it's not such an important teaching because they don't talk about that. If the devotees, if the followers of Srila Prabhupada don't talk about it much, then it can't be that important. Of course, people may not actually think this. They may not go through so much ratiocination. But that will be the effect. We talk about those things which we consider to be important. So if we don't talk about how Mayavada is wrong, then people will think, well, even if they read it in the books, they think, well, maybe it's not so very important. You may say, why say it's wrong? Why don't we just say what's right? But to establish what's right, we also have to establish what's wrong. Because what's wrong is being preached in the world. It's very commonly preached in the world. So we have to dismantle these misconceptions and show how they're wrong before we can actually establish what is right. Because if we just say what is right, if we say Krishna is supreme, we should all surrender to him, the Mayavadis will agree. They'll say, yeah, that's true, that's great, that's wonderful, very good. But among themselves they'll think, that's good for you because you're on a lower level. So let these foolish people do bhakti. And later on, bahunam janmanamante gyanavan mang naprapadyante, they'll forget all about this surrendering and they'll just understand that Vasudeva Sarvamaham, that I am the all-pervading Vasudeva. So this is their twisted philosophy in which they can agree with us. And then we say, why are we against the Mayavadis? They're not against us. They're nice to us. Why should we be so badly against them? Yeah, they're nice to us. It's like a man gives sweets to a child and takes him away and stabs him and kills him. It seems nice, but his intention is not nice at all. So, a few more points there, summary. How can we change Mayavadi to devotee of Krishna in the singular? If it was only one, it would be better, but unfortunately, there are many Mayavadis. We can't change anyone. We can't do anything. All we can do is repeat the message of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, and in various ways try to induce people by giving them Krishna Prasadam, by preaching to them, by inducing them to chant the holy name. Generally people who are thoroughly committed to such a sinful doctrine, it's very difficult to change them, generally speaking. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. But generally we preach to the innocent. That's we may preach to the Mayavadis also directly, but we don't expect them to change, but at least we can expose for the sake of people who are influenced by Mayavad but not committed to it, to innocent people, so that they can understand that it's wrong. Of course, they have this very clever defense mechanism, which I just mentioned, that the Mayavadis have promoted this idea that sadhus should just, and the Prakrita Sahajiyas, that sadhus should just be nice and smile, and then these Vaishnavas come along and they're all uptight. They're not very advanced. That's a Mayavadi conception, that sadhus should always be smiling and nice and never argue with anyone. But that's not the example of our acharyas who fought with the Mayavadis. They'll say, you see, you're fighting. That means you're not very advanced. We agree with what you say. Whatever you say, we accept, because that's all right. That's for you. You do bhakti. That's okay. All right, you do it. Whatever you do, it's all okay, because everything's all the same anyway. That's their philosophy. So we also have to establish that this idea of just being nice, so-called nice, is not at all nice. So it is difficult. We find that in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes that he had devotees in Varanasi, but they were not able to rebut the Mayavadis. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. Now, commenting about this, one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers said, well, he didn't fight with them, he just showed his effulgence. But Prabhupada said, yeah, but there was discussion also. He fought philosophically. He was humble, but then when it came to discussion, he didn't accept what they said, and he defeated them. So, if we openly and strongly speak against the cheating sadhus, it may spoil the whole purpose, as anyway, people outside don't have any faith in any sadhu, so they may find the bona fide Vaishnava sadhu as well to be cheaters by finding faults in them. So how to disregard their faith and take sadhus and simultaneously instill faith in bona fide sadhus? Speak the truth clearly. Speak the facts clearly. Anyone who has any modicum of sincerity, or even that uncommon commodity called common sense, they will be able to appreciate if we speak the truth. And it's not a difficult thing to understand. Just like, for instance, if we say, birth, death, old age and disease is miserable, is it a religious belief? According to the Hindus, birth, death, old age and disease are miserable. Is it a Hindu belief? It's a fact. Dehinosmin yata dehe komarang yovanang jaratata dehantara praptihi. Is this a Hindu belief? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that children grow old and die. Is it a Hindu belief? It's a fact. So that there is a supreme controller who is a distinct, intelligent entity is something which anyone whose consciousness is not polluted grossly can understand. So if we speak the facts insistently, then it's very difficult to rebut. So people may say, well, you're not being a sadhu. And you say, well, right, I didn't come here to play a game of being a sadhu. If you think a sadhu should be like this or like that, that's your trip. But we came here to speak about the nature of reality. If you don't like the presentation, well, that's something else. But again, I've discussed all these things in this book on strongly speaking in Srila Prabhupada's service. Srila Prabhupada gave the example, actually. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave that previously. And it's probably an ancient example because the acharyas, they speak the same thing generation after generation. That if a boy is flying a kite, he's on the terrace of a house and he's flying a kite and he's just looking up and he's not seeing that he's going towards the edge of the terrace and he'll fall off. He's in a precarious position. You might say to him politely, excuse me, and he said, don't disturb me. You have to grab him and look out, you fool, you're going to fall off the edge. You have to take some urgent action. If you're just very polite, he may not listen. Don't disturb me. So or you may have to grab him because he's in a very dangerous position which he's not aware of. So he might complain, well, you didn't speak to me politely. Yeah, but I saved your life. So what's more important? Is it more important that superficial people think of us as being nice, or that sincere people have the opportunity to hear the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu loud and clear? You decide. So, Hare Krishna Maharaj, he's offering me a Hare Krishna, whoever it may be. Thank you very much for giving a very beautiful explanation and elaboration of Srila Prabhupada's mission to defeat and smash Mayavada. I get afraid when I see the word beautiful. It means maybe I didn't make it clear, because when we're talking about Mayavada, it's not beautiful, it's ugly. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 25th chapter, Lord Kapila explains to Mother Devahuti about how service to great souls opens the path of liberation. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions about two kinds of transcendentalists, impersonalists and devotees of the personal form of the Lord. Well, that's there also in the 5th canto, Mahantas te samarchitta prashanta. And then Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that there are two kinds of transcendentalists, impersonalists and devotees. Can you explain the difference between an impersonalist and a Mayavadi from Srila Prabhupada's perspective? Srila Prabhupada hasn't, to my knowledge, very clearly differentiated from them. There are some kinds of, this question quite often comes up. Brahmavadis are, when we refer to Brahmavadis in Srila Prabhupada's terminology, we refer to impersonalists but not Mayavadis of the Shankara school. It refers to ancient Brahmavadis or impersonalists, especially the examples are given of the 4 Kumaras and of Shukadev Goswami, who, when they had the opportunity to come in contact with Krishna directly, or in the case of the Kumaras, when they smelt the scent of the tulasi leaves off at the feet of Lord Vishnu, then their mind and body changed and they became attracted to the personality of Godhead. And Shukdev, when he heard about the qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he became attracted. So in the case of the four Kumaras, we know that they knew about Vishnu being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, why would they go to Vaikuntha to see him? But at the same time, they didn't have a very clear conception of his supremacy or of the nature of bhakti. And in the case of Shukdev, he was interested in liberation from this material world. In both cases, it seems that they had not had the association of a pure devotee. Of course, the four Kumaras are born from Brahma, through whom Krishna broadcast Vedic knowledge in this world. But from the very birth, they had a fallout with their father and distanced themselves from him. So they may not have heard, they may have heard the message of Godhead from pure devotees, but when they did have the opportunity to come in contact with Krishna and Krishna consciousness, they automatically took it up. Whereas in the case of Mayavadis, they cultivate a sense of distance from Krishna and disdain of bhakti, considering it to be on a lower level. They have a whole philosophy in which they reject Vaishnavism. They reject Vishnu's supremacy. So, nowadays we won't find four Kumara types. We might find some impersonalists who are less poisonous. Some are very poisonous, some are very envious. Some less so. Due to association, they may have adopted impersonalism, but they also have some attraction to Krishna. It's a perverse, strange mixture. They have some attraction to Krishna, but philosophically they accept a teaching which is actually envious of Krishna. So we do find mixed cases. But because they're mixed cases doesn't mean that we should let them get away with broadcasting the wrong ideas. So, what is the difference between Vishishtadvaita of Ramanujacharya and the Chintya Bheda Bhed of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Go write a PhD thesis about it. As Srila Prabhupada, if you want to get into the details, there are differences, of course. But Srila Prabhupada didn't stress the difference very much. We can say that Achintya Bheda Bhed darshan is the fructification or the mature exposition of all the Vaishnava philosophies that were taught previously. So, even to understand all this is, to understand Ramanuja's philosophy, then you have to study Vedanta. So, actually someone asked me that in a public program in Tamil Nadu recently. And I started he was a Sri Vaishnava, and I started to discuss some of the differences, and then he interrupted and said, actually there's no difference. I said, okay, alright, no difference. Just chant Hare Krishna. But then I still said, but for the modern age, this is more practical actually, this chanting. So he accepted that. When we come across impersonalists, they ask for reference from Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, etc. Prabhupada had not written all these texts, he had not translated them. Then which books should we show them as reference? Can we show books of other publications? You give them Bhagavad Gita as it is. Vedescha sarveraham eva Veda. Bhagavad Gita is the summation of all the Vedas, Upanishads and Puranas. So, matah parataram nanyat kinchedasti. Everything's there. The same question was asked by Panchadravida Swami. Yeah, he said, I'm in South India and there's all these Mayavadis and Smartas and Sri Vaishnavas and Madhvas and all different people, and they all attack me with all these shlokas, and I don't. Prabhupada said, you learn 30 Bhagavad Gita shlokas and you can preach to anyone. He didn't say which ones, but just like that, people say, well, in the Rig Samhita or something like that, this. Hey, well, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Vedesha Savaraham Eva Vedyaha. So whatever you want to say whatever you want to quote from Shastra should be understood in the light of that. That's all. That's definitive. It's not that we take one statement and understand it independently. Everything's to be understood in terms of the definitive statement. That's what that very term is used. Jiva Goswami has identified in Srimad Bhagavatam the Paribhasha Sutra, which means the definitive statement. Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. Everything else in Srimad Bhagavatam is to be understood in terms of this. So even when we hear about Krishna stealing the clothes of the gopis, you have to remember, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. And because Srimad Bhagavatam, Jiva Goswami has shown that Srimad Bhagavatam is the, in Bhagavatam it stated itself, Negama kalpataro galitam phalam. It is the ripened fruit of the tree of the Vedas, and that tree, it's a wish-fulfilling tree. So if whatever you want, karma, jnana, yoga, siddhi, anything, you can get from the Vedic process, but the ripened, mature fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge is Srimad Bhagavatam. So everything should be understood in relationship to all of this. If you want, you can quote one Upanishad, another, you can learn this, that, but then you have to get into Sanskrit grammar for interpretation and understanding. It becomes very complex. Just like the famous Tattvamasi and Madhvacharya, which means that you are, which is a favorite of the Mayavadis. And Madhvacharya, he says, you are of that. In other words, you are a servant of Krishna. Although if you see the context, directly it doesn't appear to be like that. So then you can spend days and weeks and months discussing, or don't bother. Just give them Bhagavad Gita as it is and say, you find someone else to discuss with all these things, and I'll find some people who are interested to chant Hare Krishna. But some devotees in our movement, it's good if some can be very deep in Shastra, so that they can reply to all these things. But not that often I'll find people, actually it used to be in South India especially, that people come up to you in the middle of the street and quote some shlok and say, what do you got to say about that? And you're supposed to know what the shlok is, taken from the most obscure possible source. He doesn't give you a translation. You're supposed to just understand what it is and comment on it. But nowadays, people, if they know one line or one shloka, they think they're a big pundit. And they quote it. And often people, just like people often say, well, in the Bhagavad Gita, the blah, 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 this, they say this. In the Bhagavad Gita, it promotes casteism. That's a common thing. people say. So you can ask them, which verse in Bhagavad Gita? I'm not aware of that. Can you tell me where in Bhagavad Gita casteism is supported? They don't know. I said, well, I heard it. I said, well, here's Bhagavad Gita. I carry Bhagavad Gita with me. Can you just look through it and tell me which verse supports casteism? So often these people, they're bluffers. They don't know. They just pretend they know. There are a few students in our college who are followers of Swami Narayana or Shankaracharya, but they come to our Bhagavad Gita classes. So how should we deal with them? Let them come and hear more and more, or tell them clearly this right philosophy? Well, if you just have them come and hear more and more, but you don't tell them the right philosophy, when are they ever going to hear it? If you think, someone here is a Swami Narayan follower, so I shouldn't say that Krishna is supreme because he thinks Swami Narayan is supreme. So, okay. And there's a Shankaracharya follower and he thinks all is one. So I shouldn't say that Mayavada is wrong. And there's someone else who follows Sai Baba. So I shouldn't say that, what are you going to do, Then you've got nothing left to say. You just sit there and say, Om. And then the Christian will say, well, I believe in Jesus. Okay, Om Sai Jesus. Wait a minute. Did I just start an Upper Sampradaya? At the very least, in our own temples, we have to speak the truth. That's clearly. And if people don't like it, then there's a whole world out there where you can go and do what you like. At least in our temples we have to speak the truth. At the very least, we have to say it clearly. Now there may be stages also. That it may be that you have introductory classes for newcomers, and you may have, like this, gradations, but you can't put it off forever. And again, some points, you just speak from Bhagavad Gita, that this is, there is truth and there is non-truth. Truth is established by Shastra. So, actually you should, if you know there's a follower of Swami Narayan, you may not directly mention the name, but you can, bring up the point that in all the Shastras, Vede Ramayane Chaiva Purane Bharate Tata Adavante Cha Madhye Cha Hari Sarvatra Giyate. Hari, Krishna, Vedescha Sarve Raham Eva Vedeha. Krishna is glorified. And there are many people, you can say like that. In Calcutta they have any number of Bhagawans, and in Bangalore they have one who just died, and here in Maharashtra there's some fakir who they call a Bhagawan, and everywhere there are regional Bhagawans. But the actual Bhagawan, Yang Brahma, Varanendra, Rudra, Marutastun, Vanti, Divya, Istavai, is all over the universe. People are glorifying Krishna, not this Ramakrishna or Sai Baba number 1 or number 2. Number 3 is probably coming quite soon. Not some Sri Sri or Nirasha or none of these people. So Krishna is supreme. That's throughout time. No one had ever heard of all these people until recently. It's just like by advertisement. By advertisement you can make. But what is Shastra? And so there's no basis in Shastra. Actually, if they're followers of Swami Narayana, we published in the Gujarati Bhagavad Darshan in 2 or 3 parts, Gokul Chandra Prabhu's exposition of the Swami Narayan mythology. So you can give that to them if they read Gujarati, which they probably do, if they're Swami Narayan followers. So there's the answer to that. Is there any philosophical deficit in the Swami Narayan Dharma? often practiced in Gujarat. Which one? I mean, there are several sampradayas, right? I mean, they all say each other has got a deficit. Why don't you ask them? Well, there's a big problem there because they accept him, Swaminarayan, to be supreme, although in his own teachings he said to worship Radha Krishna. His teachings are very good, but his followers made him out to be Bhagavan. And it used to be in their temples at, what's that? Near to... No, that's the original one, near to Vallabhidanagar. Vartal, at Vartal, they have the deity of Lakshminarayan in the center. I don't think they even have Swaminarayan in the original temple, do they? They put later, on the side. And then later on they put Swaminarayan in the center, and now they put only Swaminarayana. And now you're talking about Akshardham. They don't even talk about Swaminarayan hardly at all. They glorify this Aksha, what is it? Brahma Swarup, what is it? Prakat Brahma Swarup. They practically forgot about Swaminarayan altogether. And they just glorify this, whatever his name. Good for me, I can't remember. So there are problems. What about Krishna? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is very clear from all the Shastras, from all the culture of India since time immemorial. It's clear from this Sahajanand Swami, Swaminarayan's Shikshapatra. Then later on someone made a Vachanamrita, which is supposed to be what he said, although he didn't write it himself. And now this Shikshapatri has been rewritten to edit out what he said about Radha and Krishna being supreme. This is deception. So definitely there are problems. There's no problem in Swaminarayan's teachings, but there are problems with what's being taught in his name. He is not Bhagavan. He is a devotee of Bhagavan. He never claimed to be anything else. If he did, then he's cheating, because he's not Bhagavan. It's just some local fashion, that's all. And that also, you say Gujarat, but it's not everyone. It's mostly Patels. Patels Bhagavan. And how can that be? Once I spoke strongly against demigod worship in a class, and one of the students in the audience felt offended. From then I tried to moderate my tone and be more careful about how I speak, even though the content is the same. I think the right way to preach to such people. Is this the right way to preach to such people, since I fear they may go away if I speak strongly? Again, this is all discussed. Did you all hear that? Did I say it clearly enough? All right, I'll read it again. Once I spoke strongly against demigod worship in a class, and one of the students in the audience felt offended. From then on, I tried to moderate my tone and be more careful about how I speak, even though the content is the same. Is this the right way to preach to such people, since I fear they may go away if I speak strongly? This is all discussed in my book on speaking strongly in Srila Prabhupada's service. So you can read that. Yeah, some people may feel offended. That's true. Definitely if you speak strongly, some people may feel offended. Some people's lives may change also. Those who are offended, why are they offended? Because they're rascals. If you speak the truth and they don't like it, that just proves they're a rascal. And it often, actually, people tell me I shouldn't speak strongly because people get offended. But mostly I find it's the devotees who get offended because they're afraid of other people getting offended. It's not often, actually, that people feel offended like that. But even if they do, then later they may change. Just like Srila Prabhupada, you can read in the conversations, he once in America, one professor was brought to him, and Prabhupada he just cut him up. He was really heavy with him, and he went away, and then for years, he was talking badly among the academia about Prabhupada and this and that. But then gradually he thought, actually, he was right. I am a rascal. And then he changed. So, there are pros and cons. What is the right way to preach? You can't say exactly, because you never know how people are going to react. If you put it mildly, then people may think, well, it's not such a big thing. That, okay, he was very polite, so that's his opinion, and he's entitled to his opinion, I'm entitled to my opinion. But if you tell them, no, you're wrong, then they might take it up and say, you don't know. The point is, you don't know how people are going to react. So you can't say there's any right way to preach. We can follow Srila Prabhupada's example. Srila Prabhupada wasn't always... by the way, in this book I've also defined what I mean by strong speaking. It doesn't necessarily mean shouting at people, calling their names, but just making the matter very clear. And the truth itself is strong. It's very difficult to present the actual teachings of Shastra in a manner that will not jolt people, because they don't like to think about these things. Birth, death, old age and disease. We are controlled, we have to surrender, we are subordinate. If you state the actual fact, it's not palatable. So, how exactly to do it so people will... The point is that people should get the message. Which, as I said at the beginning of this talk, people, despite our movement being well known and respected, at least in India, mostly people don't even know that we have a message, let alone what it is. That suggests we need to start making it clear to people. People tend to think of our movement, we build temples, we have festivals like Rath Yatras, and we sing and dance Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, and we feed children. That's what they think our movement is. They don't know many people also know there's ISKCON's Bhagavad Gita. What's in it? People in general. And generally people don't know. So, alright, we build temples, very good. Movement's popular, very good. Maybe it's time that people should get to know what our message is. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes we have a fear of losing the opportunity for the second time. Like once they give us an opportunity, once they spoken strongly, the next time they don't invite us. So
yeah, it's a quandary, isn't it? Because if we do all these things so that people will be favorable to us, but then when we say the message, we're afraid that they won't like to hear it and then they won't listen to us. So we're doing everything we can to preach, but what we actually have to give, we're afraid that if we say it, then they won't like it. Like I often say in our movement, we're very busy collecting money so that we can preach, but we can't preach because we're collecting money. Because if we preach, we're afraid people won't give us money. So we're caught in a... Why are ISKCON people always collecting money? Because we have to preach. But if we actually say what we have to say, then we're afraid people won't give us any money. So, what's our priority? We have to think. It's a delicate thing. It's a quandary. But my point is, I'm not saying that we should immediately, just run out in the street, catch people, turn them upside down, punch them in the face and yell at them, "Surrender to Krishna!" I never thought of that before. Maybe it's a good idea. You never know. It might work. It's a new preaching technique. But my point is that in this On Speaking Strongly in Srila Prabhupada's service book is that as a movement we have become aware of the dangers of speaking strongly in a manner that might be considered fanatical. But we've become well aware of that. But I'm now trying to create an awareness of the dangers of not speaking strongly at all. We've gone too extreme. Because if we see the example of Srila Prabhupada and previous acharyas, they did speak clearly and strongly in public, and they did become unpopular also. So, like this, temples, prasadam distribution, all these programs. Actually, I'm just speaking what's all in here. That people, and then when we speak strongly, and people may not like it, but they think, well, actually they have nice temples. So they get caught. What's going on? You have these people doing all these nice things, and then they say all these horrible things. What's going on here? And then they should start to think about it. So, it's a bit like Arjuna, isn't it? He practiced all his life. He got up there at Kurukshetra. They're all vowed, yeah, we got. And then he thought, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to fight. It's horrible. And when he's actually faced with the situation, but he's ordered to do it. Most of Shankara's followers, especially the Makts like Kanchi Sringeri, seem to worship Lord Shiva or Parvati more than Vishnu, even though they say everything is the same. Why is this so? You can go and ask them. It's there, you know. I'm not going to try and justify their philosophy. It's tamasic. It's tamasic. So Lord Shiva is the overseer of Tamagun. Does this inclination have anything to do with their teachings? Yeah, well, Shankara is accepted, Shankaracharya is accepted as by his followers as Lord Shiva. But directly the Shankaras much, they're not so influential now. Directly they're not very influential. As these popularistic Swamis and Sadhvis. I mean, one thing, at least the Shankaracharyas, they have some philosophy. It's a rubbish philosophy, but at least it is some philosophy. Whereas, you know, some woman comes and just hugs everyone. There's no philosophy, just feeling good. But so the modern Hinduism, for want of a better term, is the influential people are ammas and babas and bappas and all these kind of things. What is it? Amma, Appa, Swamis, all these. So people learn their Hinduism from TV serials. Isn't it? It's pathetic. It's really pathetic. It's really hopeless. So these people are cheating. You should let people know that pious Hinduism is not going to help you. And even the past pious Hinduism might have helped you more, but nowadays with all these, the face of Hinduism is all these absolutely cheating kind of people who just make a personality cult centered around themselves. isn't it? They don't promote Krishna. They don't even promote any demigods. They just promote themselves. That's all. We see daily many people come to the temple, but unknowingly they speak Mayavada to others. What should we do? We preach to them. Srila Prabhupada spoke about Mayavada boldly, but Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, instead of speaking boldly, he melted their heart through humility. Well, I just spoke about that one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers had criticized ISKCON devotees for being too confrontational. And the devotee, the ISKCON devotee, replied to that godbrother Srila Prabhupada that, well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he also argued with the Mayavadis, and then the Swami, Prabhupada's godbrother, said, no, he didn't argue, he just was very humble and he won their hearts. And Prabhupada, at this point when he was being told this, but he said, but there was discussion, rascal. By rascal, he was referring to his godbrother. So definitely there was discussion. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he, although it's not detailed in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it's said that every comment on the Vedanta Sutra of Shankaracharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he defeated that. With Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya also. Although Chaitanya Mahaprabhu behaved humbly with him, when it came to discussion, there was discussion back and forth, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu defeated him. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would say something, Sarvabhauma would reply, and then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would defeat him. So, yes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed some humility in how he approached the Mayavadis in the beginning, but then he didn't, in the name of humility, he didn't just make friends and have a photo taken with them. But he discussed and defeated their philosophy. So, I also generally, when I meet what we can call traditional Mayavadis, I don't start blasting them. We respect that they respect the Vedas even indirectly or in a perverse way, and that they follow some culture, they follow some tradition. But if we meet people who are followers of these nonsense people, which means the majority, then we have to point that out. That these people are nonsense. So, they may not call you again. Personally, I often find it very difficult not to say what is wrong with them. They're so blatantly and horribly wrong, and they're spoiling their lives. And then you have to say, at least I feel impelled to do so. There are many such instances. And yeah, they might not call. Just one came in my mind, and I'm supposed to be going to Dubai in a few days. So once in Sharjah, which is next to Dubai, some man told me, oh, there's a Sri Vaishnava. He wants to call you to his house. So I went there and I saw he had pictures of Ranganatha, and then I saw some pictures Sai Baba on his altar. I said, what is this? Why are all your forefathers going back generations, they only worshipped Narayana. Why are you worshipping this Sai Baba? Why are you spoiling your family tradition? Your forefathers will be disgusted with you. So he wasn't happy, but who is going to tell him that? Which is a fact. It's disgraceful that someone I was invited to his house because I was told he is a good Sri Vaishnava. And I go there and I see that he's doing this great aparad of worshipping Sai Baba along with Ranganatha Swami. So who will tell him? If I don't tell him, I don't think anyone else is going to tell him. Someone should tell him. What do you think? And then he gave me a donation and he never called me again. Gave quite a good donation. So I won't get any more donation from him. But I think Ranganath Swami will be, I think he would, Krishna should be displeased if I go there and if I don't say anything, then I'm saying yes, very good. Several times, in Bahrain also. They must have heard. They took me to some house and all nice pictures of this and that and of Ranganath Swami, Balaji. And then I wanted to go to the toilet, but I went in the wrong room and then I saw they'd put away all their Sai Baba pictures. Then I came out again. And I told them, you see, you know this is wrong, that's why you've hidden these pictures. This just shows how insincere you are, what hypocrites you are. What are you going to tell them? That, just pretend you didn't see them. They know it's wrong. Otherwise, why did they hide them all away? How can Mayavad creep in among devotees or an individual's attitude? But if we don't discuss these things, then the Mayavad which is there will become manifest. We should discuss. Doesn't mean that every class we have to discuss, but you see Srila Prabhupada discussed it often. It's a perennial disease of the conditioned soul. And you'll get strong devotees. Maybe some people will go away, but those who stay will be convinced. If you think, we've got to bring everyone in, and then you'll have all kinds of Mayavadis among you who are not truly convinced. And you always have to be careful that you can't speak clearly because you might offend them and they might go away. Better you keep fully convinced devotees. If you make everything clear, then at least you know those who are with you are truly with you. If you have to fight a war against Maya, you can't have traitors in the army. Or you can't even have people who are not fully committed. You can't do much. If you're always so much afraid of offending people, you can't do much. You have to change the message or just leave out so many things which are given by our acharyas. It's a heavy message. Surrender to Krishna. If we just say chant Hare Krishna, people will like it. Everyone, Mayavadis will also like it. But then when do you come to the point? So, like I say, all these points are in that book. Hare Krishna. You have some questions? Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Well, this is a quote from Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
Commentary. And you had samples on Vikasa.
Yeah, I posted it out myself.
From the 4th canto, 22nd chapter, 24th verse purport, Prabhupada says that we should not criticize others' methods of religion. There are different types of religious systems operating under different qualities of material nature. Those operating in the modes of ignorance and passion cannot be as perfect as that system in the mode of goodness. In Bhagavad Gita, everything has been divided into 3 qualitative divisions. Therefore, religious systems are similarly categorized. When people are mostly under the modes of passion and ignorance, the system of religion will be of the same quality. A devotee, instead of criticizing such systems, will encourage the followers to stick to their principles so that gradually they can come to the platform of religion in goodness. Simply by criticizing them, a devotee's mind will be agitated. Thus, a devotee should tolerate and learn to stop agitation.
Yeah, so Srila Prabhupada also followed that policy, especially with Christians. He didn't go out and say they're wrong. Privately he would. He would point out among his own disciples defects, but among Christians, Srila Prabhupada would usually hit on the point that Jesus says, "Thou shalt not kill. Why are you killing?" That was he didn't get into a whole theological discussion. And in fact, in that conversation with Cardinal Danielou in France, the cardinal, who is the head of all the Catholics in France, he said, "Why are you always talking about this? Let's go to some higher topic." And Prabhupada said, "No, let's get this straight first. First of all, you accept that you should not kill animals." So, that was Srila Prabhupada's general policy with Christians. Not with Mayavadis. And also, it is also a fact, I'm stressing on one side, but it's not that we're just against Mayavad, but we also have to glorify Krishna. How beautiful is Krishna, how merciful is Krishna. It's not all one-sided. It may seem that I'm one-sided because I just came here and I happen to speak on this. And it may seem overall I'm imbalanced in that way, but if you see the whole movement, how it's practically dropped all this, so if I am a bit this way, it still doesn't counteract all the lacking the other way. Yeah. Sometimes we find that people upset at our direct approach directly begin to badmouth Srila Prabhupada. Really? I haven't had that experience. I've had a lot of people, well, not a lot, but I've had people not like... I remember in Malaysia, when I was in Malaysia in the 1980s, it was quite common that people would distribute a lot of books, and many Hindus would, not many, but it was not uncommon that people would say, "Oh, why does he say this? Why does he call people rascals? Why does he say only Krishna is supreme?" So we used to get that. But from my own personal strong speaking, I don't, because mostly people don't know Srila Prabhupada. That's another thing. People know Vivekananda, this Ananda, that Ananda. They don't know Prabhupada very well. Such Vaishnava aparad could hamper their spiritual life. Well, it's not my experience. So I don't know if that statement is correct. Maybe you fear that they'll badmouth Srila Prabhupada. But again, if you do, what can you do? I mean, Krishna says these teachings of his in Bhagavad Gita should not be spoken to those who are not devoted, those who are not austere, those who are not engaged in devotional service. But then Srila Prabhupada told us to preach Bhagavad Gita everywhere. So people will, if we preach Krishna consciousness, there will be more criticism of Krishna. Definitely. Because if people are not thinking about Krishna at all, then they won't speak badly of him. So definitely if we preach, it's going to increase the offenses. Not directly, but that will be one side effect. But that doesn't mean that we should not preach, and that people who will take to Krishna consciousness, they won't get that opportunity if we don't do so. So it's inevitable that if we are going to propagate anything, whether you promote Coca-Cola, some people will speak badly of it. If you promote Marxism, some people will speak badly of it. That's inevitable if you promote anything. But we want to promote Krishna consciousness. My grandmother was about to seek initiation and had a good understanding of this philosophy, yet she turned away upon hearing the word rascal in an SP class. That means she didn't have a good understanding of the philosophy. This is your misunderstanding. Whoever wrote this doesn't have a good understanding of the philosophy. You don't have a good understanding because Krishna himself uses these words again and again in Bhagavad Gita. Mudha. Again and again. So it's good she didn't get initiated because initiation means that you're dikha kale bhakta kare atta samarpan. You're supposed to surrender yourself fully. But if you're not prepared, if you think I've got a better opinion than Krishna, then you're definitely not ready for initiation. And if you think that someone who is disturbed by the word rascal has a good understanding of the philosophy, you yourself don't have a good understanding. You have maybe a good understanding of some philosophy, but it's not Krishna's philosophy. Namang dushkushina murha prapadyante naradhama maya parita jnana asurang bhavam ashrita. This is Bhagavad Gita philosophy. So this is why I'm stressing, because you see, our devotees themselves, it seems to be this idea, we just have to bring many people and get them initiated, but understanding what? If we leave out all the things that they don't like, but then how is it possible? Sarvadhaman parityaja. That means we have to accept what Krishna says, not what we like. Then there's no question of surrender to Krishna. It's a heavy thing for the conditioned soul to surrender to Krishna. And that's why Vaishnavism in India, prior to Srila Prabhupada and prior to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, was so weak, because it's half chicken philosophy. We take the things we like and we leave out the things we don't like. We like this chanting, but we don't like all this surrendering. We like chanting, but we like to eat fish also. That's in Bengal. It's cheap. You just pull it out of the pond. It's nutritious. There's nothing in, you see, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita doesn't say don't eat fish. So, it's okay. So many arguments you'll hear, but it's a half chicken philosophy. You take what you like and you don't take what you don't like. But then everything becomes watered down. It becomes simply a semblance. Then, what happened? Then Krishna sends an acharya who just has to fight and fight. If you think that we won't fight, we won't be strong, you'll actually cause more violence. This is Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy, non-violence. But it causes more violence. If you don't, just like for instance, if there's no police force, the criminal, talking theoretically here, if there are no police, then the criminals will just do whatever they like. Or Vena Maharaj, there's an example. He was violent. He was not a good man. But when he was killed, there was no one to check all the roads. It increased the violence. He was bad, but in his absence, the badness increased. So, just like violence, or the threat of violence and discipline is required in human society to keep it in check. And if that is removed, then it requires, then greater violence results, and then an even greater measure of violence is required to stop that. So in the same way, unless we have a certain measure of corrective, clear, strong speaking within Vaishnavism, then it'll create a situation in which there will be more anomalies, there will be deviation, and it will require stronger speaking. It will require strong measures, very strong measures, to bring the sampradaya back to the right point. So a regular steady input of preaching against Mayavada, cheating and all these things, that is required. Otherwise things will get more and more out of control. Question? Yes, please. Give the microphone.
Hare Krishna, we have a very close relative there. He is, in fact, my brother-in-law. He is very much inclined towards Brahma Kumari, Prajapati Brahma Kumari.
He's an idiot. Anyone who's inclined to Brahma Kumari, even if it's yourself, whoever it may be, they have a very strong desire to be cheated. Because some things are not so obvious, but if anyone has even a slight bit of human intelligence, they can understand this is champion in bogusness. They're way ahead of everyone else.
Initially, they are from Brahman families. They were serving in the temple also.
So you tell him. You should tell him. Why have you gone to this nonsense organization, being a Brahmin, having such a good background? It's completely nonsense.
He had some bad association. He is from IT Bombay, and he was.
That's another problem. They get their minds filled with all this atheism in the name of science.
And Valsad, I know some devotee, initiated devotees in Valsad, in Gujarat. So there in Atul he is working, and he had this bad association from last 8-10 years, and because of that he started going to that center, Brahma Kumari center. Initially
So tell him, what they're talking complete rubbish. Lord Shiva spoke Bhagavad Gita. What nonsense. Isn't it? It's completely nonsense.
But he starts explaining me something all the time when I talk.
Then you read Prabhupada's books. Just on that one point alone, you don't even have to say many things. Just on this one point alone, they say Shiva spoke Bhagavad Gita. On this one point alone, you can point out what complete nonsense they are. Completely mad. I think someone maybe was drunk when he wrote all those things. It's amazing that Maya gives such creative intelligence to people. Yeah.
But Brahma Kumari is not living. That is the problem. And I have got only sister. And her husband is there. And she's torn apart. And then he come here and said...
Anyway, there are different ways. You don't have to shout at him. You can just laugh at him. It's a suggestion. I'm just suggesting. It's just a suggestion, that's all. You can say, oh, you're a Brahma Kumari. They say that, don't they say that Lord Shiva spoke Bhagavad Gita? They say, ho. Like that, you can demonstrate what a fool he is. That's a suggestion. That's maybe what. In the Gujarati Bhagavad Darshan also, we had an article about the Brahmit Kumaris. You can maybe show that to him also. You can show that to him. But what can you do? I mean, if they're so committed and determined to be cheated, it's very difficult. We always have this experience with people if they're committed. That's also why Srila Prabhupada, he says that you don't disturb people who are following different religions, this and that. But Srila Prabhupada didn't apply that in the case of Indian Mayavadis. He applied that in the case of Christians especially. And Muslims. He didn't meet so many Muslims. You'll hardly find Srila Prabhupada says anything, even privately, badly against Muslims. Interesting, huh? Srila Prabhupada wasn't a Hindutvavadi.
So these people are totally atheists, like, no.
It is, yeah, it is. It's very difficult. It's very bad association. But you can also point out humbly to him, as humbly as you can, that actually this is completely wrong, and I hope you wake up from it someday. Again, speaking strongly doesn't, you see, the way I'm speaking to you, you might not speak, among ourselves we may speak. When you speak to them, if you just say, you're a fool, it might work, it might not work. But just like Srila Prabhupada, he used to say that it's not enough to say that God is great, you have to know how God is great. So it's not enough to tell people that they're fools, you have to explain to them, if they have any intelligence whatsoever, why they are fools. And that's what Prabhupada did. He would speak philosophy with people and show them that they were wrong. He tried. It's not that everyone who listened to Srila Prabhupada accepted it. Srila Prabhupada is the perfect Paramahamsa, directly come from the spiritual world. He preached to everyone he met many people. Most people Prabhupada spoke to didn't accept what he said. Some did. If he hadn't said what he said, if Srila Prabhupada hadn't said what he said, we wouldn't all be here today. So it's not necessarily that you just go in there and say, you're a fool, you're a rascal. But you can say that, you may say in a gentle voice also, actually these ideas are foolish. You can say in a gentle voice also. Or you can indirectly point it out and say, Lord Shiva spoke Bhagavad Gita. And say, well, I mean, all the great acharyas in Indian history, all the great sadhus, they also, and Krishna, in Bhagavad Gita itself says that Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita. There seems to be a major problem. Of course, often these people, even though they may be intelligent, when it comes to this kind of discussion, it's very difficult to keep them on one point, because they're so confused, and they go from this point to another, and they're sectarian. They're not interested in the truth. So these are all difficulties. I'm just talking about I'm not saying it's easy to convince people. It's definitely not easy. But I'm just saying we should not avoid attempting it. We should not, as a policy, avoid attempting it. In some cases we may. If the mayor of Pune was to walk in now, and he's in some mutt or something, we probably wouldn't start preaching to him about why what he's following is wrong. But as a general policy, we don't avoid speaking to everyone about all these things. To some people in some circumstances, we might not. If Srila Prabhupada was not just receiving the mayor, but actually sat down and discussed with him, then he would discuss with him, because he did discuss with everyone all these things. Okay, let me read this one out in the meantime. Srila Prabhupada did speak strongly against Mayavada, however, could you please tell how many times did he go for the newcomers in the first program he gave, for instance in a college or university program? Also, what is the difference between following and imitating? Certainly as honest preachers, we have to speak the truth. We have to expose bogus philosophies. However, does it mean we have the same purity as Srila Prabhupada and we speak fools and rascals? Most often, maybe on the egoistic platform, if we speak such strong words. So does preaching strongly mean using strong offensive words or to explain on the authority of Vedas and Acharyas? Yes, of course, it means to speak on the authorities of Vedas and Acharyas. In public programs to newcomers, Srila Prabhupada would often speak very, very strongly. I mentioned that yesterday. That Giriraj Maharaj, and this is noted in the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Giriraj Maharaj commented that Srila Prabhupada, when he was speaking in Bombay, in the Pandal program, that all the most pious people of the city were coming to listen to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada could have made them all his followers if he had pitched to them at the level they like Krishna Bhakti, and they appreciated what Prabhupada had done in the world. But Srila Prabhupada chose not to speak in a way that would sentimentally satisfy them, but he spoke very, very strongly. And he spoke in a way that was pushing them to go beyond their sentimentalism and actually commit themselves to Krishna consciousness. So, Srila Prabhupada always spoke. He didn't always in public programs speak. Well, he always spoke clearly. He always spoke the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. Almost inevitably, he pointed out defects in common misconceptions. Not always Mayavada. There are many different kinds of misconceptions. And Srila Prabhupada, he often saw what is the prevalent misconception and spoke about it. He didn't avoid it. Just like in Sweden, for instance, he spoke in Uppsala University, and he spoke about the Varnashram system. Sweden is the most socialistic country in the world. Forget Russia. Sweden is the most socialistic country. And then Srila Prabhupada spoke about first-class man, second-class man, third-class man. Swedes hate this. And at the end, someone challenged Srila Prabhupada and said, "So you think you're first class?" Prabhupada said, "No, I'm the lowest class because I'm the servant of everyone." So Srila Prabhupada, he didn't avoid the issues. Rather, he took up the issues that people had misconceptions with and addressed them. And people would criticize Prabhupada and he would say, "No, I'm speaking according to Shastra." What is the difference between following and imitating? All these things are discussed in this book. Following means we follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions, including those many instructions which I've given in the book, that we should speak strongly. Imitating means to pretend that we're on a high level when we're not. The question of do we have to have the same purity as Srila Prabhupada? This is a common misconception, that we have to be as pure as Prabhupada. We have to wait for the morning when we wake up. Oh, now I'm a Paramahamsa. And then we can speak what's in Bhagavad Gita. This is a common misconception which is addressed in this book on speaking strongly in Srila Prabhupada's service. Yeah, okay. You wanted to say something?
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you, Maharaj. Today's discussion is nice on Mayavada and how to defeat this Mayavada philosophy. But Maharaj, I beg to say that we the devotees have to be very precise and have to have sufficient knowledge about our own philosophy and about that misconceived philosophy of Mayavada, so that we can defeat them. And as you have rightly said,
yes, very good point.
Obligations, cardinal obligations to stand courageously in front of this Maharaj instead of making any compromise with them. Maharaj, in this context, I have a point to make, because we get to hear, we often come to hear that Mayavada people, they speak about Vedanta Sutra, which we don't all the time. As if it looks like they are thorough in Vedanta. And
they're bluffing. In most cases, they're bluffing.
Yeah, I know. But it looks like that. So it happened so in the case of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he was about to meet Guru, that Vikasa and Saraswati, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was insisting on chanting the holy name, dancing and singing, being the way to alleviate to deliver ourselves from this. He was saying, why don't you discuss Vedanta Sutra. Then he was speaking at length about Prabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was silent and he was speaking at length about this Vedanta Sutra, which was summarily this Tattvamasi, which means in Sanskrit, you are that, Aham Brahmasmi, you are also that, and Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. As if this is opposed to the principles of surrender. And what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was saying, that was surrender to the Supreme Lord, being that Sambandha Abhidharan. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started to speak, he thoroughly smashed this Tattvamasi. But I have read this chapter in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but I could not fully understand what Tattvamasi concept, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not approve at all. He thoroughly smashed point by point, but you have also touched here. So if you kindly elaborate a little bit once again, so that we can understand. We have to have this knowledge so that we
Yes. Very important point, which I've also discussed in this book.
Yeah.
It's a several 100-page book, so it does cover many points. That those who are going to preach should be knowledgeable. It's not that we just go and say, oh, you're all nonsense. And the person says to you, well, you're nonsense. And then you're nonsense. But there should be one should have knowledge of Shastra. And if one is going to discuss, if you're going to discuss on some specialized topic, it's good to have knowledge of it. For instance, if you want to go into a biochemistry class and speak about how evolutionary theory is wrong, you should know as much as these professors do. If you're going to go into that class, you should be well prepared for that. Right now, I'm not going to discuss in detail about Mayavada. I'm just talking about the principle of how we should speak against it, not the details. It's a big topic. I heard many years ago, I've never had it confirmed, that a devotee, after reading this 7th chapter of Adi Leela and all this technical discussion of Mayavad, said to Srila Prabhupada that, Prabhupada, I read that, but I can't understand this Mayavad philosophy. And Prabhupada said, that's good. It doesn't make any sense. If you understand it, there's a problem. There are many, many philosophical discrepancies. Many. For instance, if, as they say, all is one, undifferentiated oneness, then how are we in this position now, in which there is two-ness? If they say two-ness, duality is illusion, well then that's something, that illusion is something different from the undifferentiated oneness. And they say, no, it's just an illusion that you think it's like that. But definitely you can't say that there is in all respects undifferentiated oneness. Then they use word jugglery. They talk about vyavaharik and paramatik, but the very fact that there are two words to describe two different contents means that everything is absolute kevaladvaita. It's completely unsustainable as a philosophy. There are many, just but there are so many discrepancies in their philosophy. So many problems. But classical Mayavadis you don't meet even much nowadays. Like I say, you find that there's mostly these followers or so-called followers of these self-promoting gurus. And another thing you'll find with these self-promoting gurus is they almost always say, I'm not a guru. So they if you accuse them that you're not a proper guru, they say, oh, I'm not a guru. And just word jugglery. They make it up as they go along. They'll say one thing and then you ask them, they have some clever answers, which they also always say. So people who go to them are not very sincere. And generally we may not speak to them very much. It's people who are not committed. If people are already committed, it's very difficult to get them out. We may also discuss with such people in public just to expose them so they don't have such a good feel to cheat others. But in our general preaching, when we're aiming to bring people into Krishna consciousness, then we're more aiming at people who don't have any particular commitment. Those who already think, I'm a follower of such and such, then they develop a sectarian mentality. They're not looking for the truth. They think they've already found it. And most people are not looking for the truth either. But at least they're not mistakenly thinking that they found the truth. Hare Krishna. Thank you for tolerating me. Don't worry, I'm leaving soon. Hare Krishna. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada.
Maharaj, you came to Krishna consciousness by reading a book?
Most of Srila Prabhupada's disciples came by reading one of Srila Prabhupada's books. I also. Didn't mean that I was convinced on reading the book, but in fact I couldn't understand much of it at all, but I understood that there's something substantial here, which if I'm honest to myself, I have to inquire more about it. So I went to the temple, which for me meant going from one country to another, because in the country I was in at the time there was no temple. So, like that. Most of Prabhupada's disciples, their first substantial contact was in reading a book or Back to Godhead. Back to Godhead was also punchy. I discussed that in this book also, how there were articles like "The Demons Among Us." So in which the article begins that a demon is not necessarily, it doesn't mean someone with 4 heads and horns and flaming eyes. It could be your next door neighbor, it could be the guy at the gas station, it could be you. So there are articles like that. Heavy articles against, I remember distributing Back to Godhead. Yeah, he was, that was written by Satsrup Maharaj. The Demons Among Us was Dhruta Kama, was it? And that same issue they had the Great Moon Hoax. What had happened was that, this was when Prabhupada was present, that the editors of Back to Godhead, they thought we should make it more accessible to people in general. It shouldn't be so strong, it'll drive people away. So we should just have articles like, so-and-so, printing executive, when I chant Hare Krishna I get relief from stress. And they took all the devotees and dressed them as non-devotees. And said printing executive meant Rameshwar, and then restaurant manager, and they presented them as ordinary people. I get freedom from stress. Then sometimes I feel I have so many problems, but when I chant Hare Krishna, the day just goes wonderfully. They made it all very light. And then some devotees were concerned with this, and they showed these editions of Back to Godhead to Srila Prabhupada. He dismissed the editing team and put in a new editing team. He didn't like that approach. And the first edition under the new editing team had these articles. The Demons Among Us, The Great Moon Hoax. Prabhupada liked that. But then there was another edition of Back to Godhead, which was just printed in England only. That's actually, you won't find that in the database, in which there was discussion of Christian tradition. And it showed how pictures of torture, this was my Christian education. That's mostly what I learned, how, because I was raised a Catholic, we learned about how the Protestants used to torture and kill the Catholics. We didn't learn about how the Catholics used to torture and kill the Protestants. So there was an article in the British edition of Back to Godhead in which they were showing pictures of torture, and it was discrediting Christianity. Prabhupada saw that, he didn't like that. He said, this is not our style of preaching. He also said that there should not be pictures of cow slaughter. You can discuss it, but there shouldn't be pictures of such horrible things. So, there's another side. Hare Krishna. With your kind permission, or even without it, I have to go.
Vikasa Maharaj ki. So thank you very much, Maharaj, for the last visit.
Oh yes, thank you so much. They're all here. The Ramayana. So many years I was praying to Lord Rama that you please manifest yourself in this Marathi edition of Ramayana. Now, by the grace of his devotee, I think you're one of them, is standing there like that, looking like that. Yeah, thank you so much. That this is the actual culture of India. This is the real spiritual life of India, not Shirdi. It's Pandharpur, Vrindavan, Ayodhya, Chitrakoot. This is the real spiritual life. Ramayana, people should know. Everyone knew. Now they don't know. So let there be Krishna Katha also. I mean, I'm not saying it should only be smashing Mayavada. There should be Katha. Let people hear the pastimes of Krishna, pastimes of Rama, pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This should be promoted everywhere. Shinu Sukhadam Shubhadam Bhavasaram. It brings happiness and auspiciousness into this world of birth and death. So let that be there also. All-round package.